The stars looked different from this part of space. Captain John Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Earth space vessel Defiance and watched the unknown system grow larger on the main screen. After 6 months of travel following the mysterious signal, they had finally arrived. "All systems nominal, Captain," said Linda Hayes, his first officer. "We're being scanned by something. Energy signature unlike anything in our database." John nodded, trying to hide the tension in his shoulders. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries. First contact with an intelligent alien species. Now that it was happening, he felt the weight of 7 billion humans on his back. "Open broadcast channels, all frequencies," he ordered. "Standard greeting package." The message was simple: peace, friendship, and an introduction to human civilization. They had debated for weeks what to include, what might offend an unknown intelligence. In the end, they went with honesty. Earth's history, both good and bad, their hopes, their art, their sciences. The response came faster than anyone expected. The main screen flickered, and then filled with the image of a being that looked almost like a tall human, but with pale blue skin, elongated features, and eyes that seemed to glow from within. "Greetings, humans of Earth," the alien said in perfect English, its voice melodic and smooth. "I am Ambassador Krell of the Zephyrian Empire. Our translation systems have analyzed your language. We welcome you to civilized space." John exchanged glances with Linda. The alien spoke English. It called itself an empire. Neither fact was reassuring. "I am Captain John Mitchell of Earth. We come in peace and friendship." The alien's lips curved into what might have been a smile. "Of course. The Emperor Zorax Viade would be pleased to welcome representatives of your species aboard our diplomatic vessel. We have much to discuss." 2 days later, John led a small team to the Zephyrian ship. It dwarfed the Defiance, stretching over 2 miles from end to end. Its hull a seamless silver that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Inside, the corridors were vast, the ceilings high, as if built for beings much larger than humans. They were led to a grand chamber where Emperor Zorax Bi waited. Unlike Ambassador Krull, the Emperor was decorated with complex patterns of light that danced across his blue skin. He sat on a floating throne, surrounded by various alien species that John guessed were other members of the Empire. "So these are humans," the Emperor said, his voice deeper than Krell's. "Smaller than I expected." John bowed slightly, following the protocol they had established with Krell. "Your Majesty, we are honored by this meeting." The Emperor waved a hand dismissively. "Your species is young. We have monitored your development since you first split the atom. Impressive progress for such a short time, though your technologies are still quaint." "We have much to learn," John said carefully. "Indeed." The Emperor leaned forward. "The galaxy is a dangerous place for unaligned worlds. Many would exploit your resources, enslave your people. The Zephyrian Empire offers protection to developing species like yours." John felt a chill. This wasn't a meeting of equals. This was a stronger power dictating terms to a weaker one. "What would this protection involve?" he asked. "Simple matters. Earth would become a protectorate of the Empire. You would benefit from our technologies, our knowledge, our defense networks. In exchange, a reasonable tribute of resources and acknowledgement of imperial authority." It sounded like colonization with a pretty name. But as the Emperor showed them displays of the galaxy, of Empire warships that could reduce planets to ash, John realized they had little choice. Earth's defenses were nothing compared to this. 3 weeks later, after tense negotiations and hurried communications with Earth's governments, John watched as the United Nations Secretary-General signed the Protectorate Treaty. Earth was now officially part of the Zephyrian Empire. "You've made a wise choice," Emperor Zorax told them, his smile not reaching his glowing eyes. "Your species will flourish under our guidance." As John looked at the Emperor, surrounded by his alien courtiers, he wondered if humanity had just secured its future or signed away its freedom. Only time would tell. And time, as they would learn, was something the Zephyrians had plenty of. 20 years passed. Dr. Karen Smith looked out the window of her lab at New Houston Research Center. The city below was a strange mix of human and Zephyrian architecture. Tall glass buildings stood next to curved alien structures that seemed to defy gravity. Sleek transport pods zipped along elevated tracks that crisscrossed the sky. On the surface, Earth had changed for the better. Disease rates were down. Energy was clean and abundant. Food production had tripled. But Karen knew the truth that lay beneath the shiny exterior. She turned back to her workstation, where a piece of Zephyrian technology sat partially disassembled. It was a simple agricultural drone, but even this basic device contained components that no human manufacturer was allowed to produce. Running analysis again, she said to her computer. The screen filled with data as the computer studied the drone's power source. Karen frowned at the results. "This makes no sense," she muttered. According to her calculations, humans should be able to build this technology on their own. In fact, Earth had been on track to develop similar systems before the Zephyrians arrived. Yet the Empire insisted these advancements were centuries beyond human capability. A soft chime announced a visitor. Karen quickly covered the drone and cleared her screen. "Come in." Scott Harper entered, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. Once a Marine, now working as a liaison between Earth governments and the Empire, Scott had the tired eyes of a man who smiled more than he wanted to. "Dr. Smith," he said with a nod. "Sorry to interrupt your work." "It's fine. What brings you here?" Scott glanced around, then lowered his voice. "I need your expertise on something. Off the record." Karen raised an eyebrow, but gestured for him to continue. Scott placed a small data drive on her desk. "I was at a trade conference last week. Met representatives from Proxima B, another protectorate world. They shared some interesting information when the Zephyrian delegates weren't around." Karen inserted the drive. Images appeared showing resource extraction operations on various planets. "What am I looking at?" "Export records, not just from Earth, but from every protectorate in this sector." Scott pointed to the numbers scrolling beside each image. "Notice anything strange?" Karen studied the data. "The outflow is massive. Much higher than the official reports claim." "Exactly. The Empire takes far more than they admit. And look at this." Scott switched to a new file showing a timeline of technological development across different worlds. Every protectorate follows the same pattern. Initial tech boost when they join, then progress slows to a crawl in key areas. Karen thought of her drone analysis. "They're keeping us dependent." "It's more than that." Scott's voice grew even quieter. "The Proximans told me about another world that discovered this pattern 3 years ago. They threatened to leave the Empire." "What happened?" Karen asked, though she feared she knew the answer. "Official story says they had a civil war that devastated their planet. The Proximans say there was no civil war. The Empire made an example of them." Karen felt a chill. The gleaming city outside suddenly seemed like a beautiful prison. "There's more," Scott continued. "I've been compiling reports from human representatives in the Imperial Senate. We're not the only species being controlled this way. The entire Empire operates on suppression disguised as protection." "Why tell me this?" Karen asked. Scott gestured at her lab. "Because you're one of the few humans who might understand their technology well enough to find us a way out." Karen was silent for a long moment. What Scott was suggesting was dangerous. If the Zephyrians discovered they were questioning Imperial authority, the consequences could be severe. "I need to show you something," she finally said, uncovering the drone. "According to my analysis, this technology isn't as advanced as they claim. I think the Empire is deliberately holding back information, making their tech seem more magical than it is." Scott studied the drone. "If that's true for all their technology, then their power over us might be built on lies," Karen finished. Outside, a Zephyrian ship glided silently over the city. Its shadow passed over the lab like a reminder of who really controlled Earth now. "We need to be careful," Karen said. "But I want to know the truth." Scott nodded. I know someone who can help. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez. She commands human ships in the Joint Fleet. If anyone knows the Empire's military capabilities, it's her. Set up a meeting, Karen said. And Scott, thank you for trusting me. He smiled, a real one this time. Maybe it's time humanity stopped being so grateful for our golden cage. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez stood at the viewport of her office on the lunar base. Earth hung like a blue jewel in the blackness. From here, you could almost pretend nothing had changed. But the sleek Zephyrian patrol ships that occasionally crossed her view told a different story. The door slid open behind her. Scott Harper and Dr. Karen Smith entered, both looking nervous but determined. Thank you for meeting us, Admiral, Scott said after Lisa had secured the room against listening devices. Your message was intriguing, Lisa replied. At 45, she was the highest-ranking human in the Joint Earth-Zephyrian Defense Fleet. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, her face lined with the stress of balancing loyalty to Earth against her official duties to the Empire. Karen placed a small device on the table. This blocks any surveillance the Zephyrians might have that we don't know about. Lisa raised an eyebrow. That's not standard Earth tech. No, Karen smiled slightly. I made some improvements to their designs. For the next hour, Scott and Karen shared their discoveries. Lisa listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker. I've suspected something like this, she finally said. The way they limit our ship designs. The way human crews are always paired with Zephyrian officers. They say it's for training, but it's really for control. Have you seen evidence of what happened to worlds that resisted? Scott asked. Lisa nodded grimly. I've seen the reports. Classified, of course. The Empire makes examples of rebels. They call it maintaining order. We need to do something, Karen said. But we can't openly resist without risking Earth. What we need is leverage, Lisa said thoughtfully. And allies. I've made contacts with officers from other protectorate worlds. Many feel as we do. The beginnings of a resistance, Scott mused. Liberation, Lisa corrected. That's what we should call ourselves. Not fighting against something, but for something. Karen nodded. I can continue my research, find more evidence of their technological deception. If we could develop our own advanced tech without them knowing. And I can gather more intelligence from other protectorates. Scott added. Build a network. I'll sound out trusted officers in the fleet, Lisa said. We'll need ships eventually, people who can operate them. The three of them looked at each other, aware of the line they were crossing. If discovered, they would be labeled traitors, not just to the Empire, but to Earth's security. We need to be extremely careful, Lisa warned. The Zephyrians have ruled for centuries because they're good at crushing dissent. Their intelligence network is everywhere. What about their technology? Karen asked. You've served on their ships. Is it as advanced as they claim? Lisa considered the question. Their weapons and drives are impressive, yes, but sometimes, she hesitated. Sometimes I notice things. Inconsistencies. Systems that seem designed to impress rather than function efficiently. And they're strangely protective of certain technologies, like the Imperial Scepter. Scott asked. Lisa's eyes widened. How do you know about that? My Proximan contacts mentioned it. They said Emperor Zorax never appears before the Senate without it. Some believe it has special powers. It's supposed to be a ceremonial object, Lisa said slowly. But yes, he keeps it close, and whenever he addresses the Senate with it, even the most argumentative representatives become agreeable. Karen leaned forward. Mind control. I don't know, Lisa admitted. But if it is, that would explain how they maintain control over so many species. Then that's what we need to focus on, Karen decided. If the scepter is their secret weapon, we need to understand it. It won't be easy, Scott said. No human has ever been allowed close to the Emperor during Senate sessions. Then we'll need someone on the inside, Lisa said. Someone the Zephyrians trust. I might know someone, Scott replied. Frank Winters. He's a human senator who's gained favor with the imperial court. Always speaks glowingly about Cypherian rule. Can he be trusted? Karen asked. Scott smiled. Frank and I served together before I became a diplomat. His public persona is just that, a persona. He's been gathering information for years. Contact him, Lisa ordered, carefully. In the meantime, we gather allies, information, and resources. We move slowly. The three nodded in agreement. Outside the viewport, Earth continued its silent turn, unaware that its first true resistance had just been born. 6 months passed. Dr. Karen Smith's lab had changed. What once was a simple research space now had a hidden section behind a false wall. Here she worked on her most secret projects, away from Cypherian oversight. Today, she stared at her latest discovery with a mix of excitement and fear. On her workbench sat a small fragment of metal that she had managed to obtain from a damaged piece of Imperial technology. Not just any technology, a piece of the communication device used by a Cypherian governor during a rare visit to Earth. Karen adjusted her scanner and ran the test again. The results were the same as the previous 10 attempts. Impossible, she whispered, though she now knew it was true. The door opened, and Scott Harper entered with Senator Frank Winters. Frank was a tall, thin man with a friendly face that hid a sharp mind. He wore the formal robes of a human representative to the Imperial Senate, deep blue with silver trim, the colors of a loyal protectorate. Dr. Smith, Frank greeted her with a slight bow, a habit he picked up from years in Imperial politics. Scott says you've made a breakthrough. Karen nodded. I have. And it's bigger than we thought. She gestured to the fragment. This is from a quantum communicator, supposedly one of their most advanced technologies. According to the Empire, humans won't develop similar technology for another century. But, Scott prompted. But it's fake, Karen said simply. The outer casing is made of materials that look exotic but serve no functional purpose. They're decorative. The actual communication technology inside is only marginally more advanced than our best systems. Frank leaned closer. You're saying they're not as advanced as they appear. I'm saying they've built an empire on theater, Karen replied. They maintain the illusion of vast technological superiority, but the gap isn't nearly as wide as they want us to believe. Scott crossed his arms. This matches what Admiral Rodriguez has found in the fleet. Many of their ship systems are similar to ours, just dressed up to look more alien and advanced. But they still have real power, Frank reminded them. Their weapons work, regardless of how they're packaged. Karen nodded. True, but I've been analyzing patterns in their technology. They don't innovate much. Most of their advancements seem to come in sudden jumps, usually after they've conquered a new species. They steal technology rather than develop it, Scott concluded. Exactly, Karen said. And I think I know where their biggest stolen technology is. She pulled up an image on her screen. It showed Emperor Zorax VII addressing the Senate, holding a long staff topped with a glowing crystal, the Imperial Scepter. Frank, you've been in the Senate chamber when the Emperor speaks. What happens? Karen asked. Frank's expression became distant. It's strange. He raises the scepter, and the crystal pulses. Then everyone just agrees with him. I've seen representatives enter the chamber angry, ready to argue, and leave completely satisfied. I always thought it was just skilled politics. It's not, Karen said firmly. I've analyzed recordings of these sessions. The scepter emits a type of radiation when activated. I believe it affects brain chemistry, makes people susceptible to suggestion. Scott whistled. Mind control. That's how they maintain their empire. Not complete control, Karen clarified. More like pushing people toward agreement, dampening conflict, making them accept things they normally wouldn't. And without that advantage, Frank asked, their whole system of control might collapse, Karen said. Think about it. They don't have the population or the natural technological advantage to control thousands of worlds. They need the scepter. Scott began pacing. So how do we use this information? I think I can build a device to block the scepter's effect, Karen said. But someone would need to bring it into the Senate chamber during an imperial address. They both looked at Frank. Security is tight around the Emperor, he said slowly, but not impossible to bypass, especially for a trusted human senator. He smiled thinly. And I've worked hard to be trusted. It would be dangerous, Scott warned. Everything we're doing is dangerous, Frank replied. But if Dr. Smith is right, this could change everything. Karen pulled out a small data pad. I need to get a more detailed scan of the scepter to finish my device. Can you get close to it? Frank nodded. The Grand Senate Assembly is in 3 months. All representatives will be there, along with the Emperor. It's the biggest ceremonial event in the Empire. Then that's our deadline, Karen said. I'll inform Admiral Rodriguez, Scott added. She'll need time to position our allies in the fleet. Outside, a Zephyrian patrol ship passed by the window. None of them paid any attention now. They were too focused on the future, a future where humanity might finally break free of its golden cage. The underground bunker beneath New Houston buzzed with activity. What had started with 3 people had grown into dozens. Humans worked alongside aliens from other protectorate worlds, all united by the desire for freedom from the Zephyrian Empire. In the center of the main room, Karen, Scott, and Admiral Rodriguez stood around a holographic display of the Imperial Senate chamber on the Zephyrian capital world. Senator Winters sent this yesterday, Scott explained to the gathered team. The Emperor will enter here, proceed to the central platform, and address the assembly. All representatives from all protectorate worlds will be present. How many? Someone asked. Over 1,000, Rodriguez answered, from nearly 200 worlds. Karen pointed to a small device on the table. It looked simple, a metal disc about the size of a coin with a blue crystal at its center. This is the neutralizer, she explained. It creates a field that blocks the scepter's emissions, but it has limited range. Senator Winters will need to be within 20 feet of the Emperor when he activates it. That's close, Scott said with concern. It's the best I can do with the materials we have, Karen replied. And Winters says he can get that close. His position as head of the human delegation puts him in the inner circle. Rodriguez nodded. What about our ships? Scott switched the display to show the space around the Zephyrian capital. We have 14 vessels with loyal crews positioned throughout the system. They're disguised as trading ships or diplomatic escorts. Not enough for a direct confrontation, Rodriguez said, but enough to create confusion if needed. She looked at the assembled team. Remember, our goal isn't war, it's exposure. If we can break the scepter's hold on the Senate, the representatives will see how they've been manipulated. Karen picked up the neutralizer. The next challenge is getting this to Senator Winters. Security will be tight. I'll handle that, said a new voice. A small greenish alien stepped forward. He had 4 arms and large dark eyes. I am Krex. My people, the Vril, are considered harmless by the Zephyrians. We serve as maintenance workers in the Senate building. I can pass the device to the senator unnoticed. Rodriguez nodded her approval. Good. Now, let's go over the emergency protocols again. As the meeting continued, Karen stepped away, feeling overwhelmed. They had planned for months, but the enormity of what they were attempting hit her anew. If they failed, Earth might pay the ultimate price. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Scott. Having doubts, he asked quietly. Wouldn't you? Karen replied. If we're wrong about the scepter, or if Winters is caught, we're risking everything. True, Scott admitted, but we're already losing everything, just slowly. Earth's resources drained, our potential capped, our future decided by others. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Sometimes the biggest risk is taking no risk at all. Karen nodded, drawing strength from his conviction. You're right, and we're not alone anymore. They looked around at the diverse group working together. Humans and aliens, once kept separate by imperial policy, now united in common cause. Have you ever wondered, Karen said, why the Zephyrians were so careful to keep different protectorate species from working closely together? Because together, we're stronger, Scott replied simply. Rodriguez approached them. Final communications just came in from Winters. He's in position on the capital world. The assembly begins in 3 days. And the neutralizer? Karen asked. Krex will deliver it tomorrow. After that, Winters goes dark until the event. Scott took a deep breath. Then it's really happening. It is. Rodriguez confirmed. The liberation is ready. Phase 1 teams are already moving to their positions. We'll begin evacuation of our families and key personnel to the backup sites tonight, just in case. What about Captain Mitchell? Karen asked, thinking of the now elderly man who had first encountered the Zephyrians 30 years ago. He's been informed, Rodriguez said. He sends his support and will be ready to speak when the time comes. His voice still carries weight. A communications officer approached them. Admiral, we're receiving an encrypted transmission from our contact in the Proximan delegation. They've arrived at the capital and confirmed their support. Rodriguez nodded. Tell them to stand by. No action until the signal. As the officer hurried away, the 3 founders of Liberation shared a look that conveyed both their fear and determination. 3 days, Karen said softly. 3 days, Scott echoed, until everything changes. The Imperial Senate building on the Zephyrian capital world was a marvel of architecture. Its massive dome rose high above the city, glowing with a soft blue light that could be seen from space. Inside, the chamber was arranged in rising circles, with each protectorate delegation assigned a section based on their status in the Empire. Senator Frank Winters adjusted his formal robes and tried to appear calm. The blue and silver fabric felt unusually heavy today, or perhaps it was just the weight of the small disc hidden in his sleeve. Senator Winters, the voice called. Frank turned to see Ambassador Krell approaching. The Zephyrian diplomat smiled with his 2 perfect teeth. A pleasure to see Earth's representative in such good spirits before the assembly. The Grand Assembly is always a momentous occasion, Frank replied, bowing slightly. Earth is honored to participate. Indeed, the Emperor was just commenting on how well humans have integrated into Imperial society. He's considering expanding Earth's resource quotas. Krell's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your loyalty has been noted. Frank maintained his pleasant expression. That's welcome news. I'll be sure to mention it in my report to Earth's Council. Please do. Krell glanced at the timepiece on the wall. The ceremony begins soon. You should take your position. As Krell walked away, Frank let out a quiet breath. Had the Zephyrians suspected something? It was impossible to tell. Their facial expressions were similar to humans, but often meant different things. Frank made his way to the human delegation's assigned position. As head delegate, his seat was in the front row, less than 30 feet from where the Emperor would stand. If all went according to plan, he would be able to move even closer during the traditional greeting ceremony. The enormous chamber filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Frank recognized the Proximans, tall with their distinctive red skin markings. The Vril maintenance workers scurried about, largely ignored by the grander delegations. One passed close to Frank, briefly touching his hand in what looked like an accidental brush. Frank felt the slight weight as something was transferred to his palm. The disc was now in place. Frank tucked it deeper into his sleeve and touched the activation switch hidden in his ring. A tiny light blinked once. The neutralizer was ready. A series of chimes echoed through the chamber, signaling the Emperor's arrival. The massive doors at the far end of the hall swung open. Emperor Zorax HFY entered, flanked by his royal guard. He wore flowing robes of silver and gold, and in his right hand, he carried the imperial scepter. The crystal at its top pulsed gently. Frank could feel a strange calm trying to settle over him as the Emperor approached. The scepter was already working, trying to make everyone in the chamber more receptive, more agreeable. He fought against the sensation, focusing on the anger he had harbored for years, watching Earth slowly drained of its resources and potential. The ceremony began with the traditional speeches. Representatives from the oldest protectorate world spoke first, offering praise and thanks to the Empire. Frank barely listened. He was watching the Emperor, waiting for his moment. Finally came the greeting ceremony. As per tradition, the heads of each major delegation would approach the Emperor's platform to bow and receive a symbolic touch from the scepter. This was the moment they had planned for. Frank heard Admiral Rodriguez's voice in his earpiece, disguised as a translation device. "Our ships are in position. Allies are standing by. We're ready when you are." As Frank's turn approached, he felt strangely calm, not from the scepter's influence, but from the certainty that they were doing what was necessary. For Earth, for all the subjugated worlds. "Senator Frank Winters of Earth," announced the Imperial Herald. Frank stood and began walking toward the Emperor's platform. Each step brought him closer to the most powerful being in the known galaxy, and to the moment that might change everything. Emperor Zorax VII looked down at him with a benevolent smile that didn't match the coldness in his eyes. The scepter glowed brighter as Frank approached. "The loyal representative of humanity," the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Step forward and receive the Empire's blessing." Frank climbed the steps to the platform. 20 feet, 15, 10. He was close enough now. His hand moved to the activation switch in his ring. It was time. Frank pressed the hidden switch in his ring. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. He bowed low before the Emperor, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. "Rise, Senator of Earth," Emperor Zorax VII commanded, raising the scepter. As Frank straightened, he noticed a flicker of confusion cross the Emperor's face. The crystal at the top of the scepter pulsed, but the usual sense of calm and agreement didn't spread through the chamber. The Emperor frowned and tapped the scepter against the floor. Again, the crystal flashed, more intensely this time. Frank could see beads of sweat forming on the Zephyrian's blue skin. "Is something wrong, Your Majesty?" Frank asked, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Throughout the vast chamber, representatives from hundreds of worlds were shaking their heads as if waking from a dream. The Proximan delegation stood up. The Vril workers stopped their tasks and turned toward the central platform. "Nothing is wrong," the Emperor snapped, his voice lacking its usual smooth confidence. "Return to your place, human." But Frank didn't move. Instead, he looked out at the gathered representatives and raised his voice. "Representatives of the galaxy, for too long we have been under the influence of this." He pointed at the scepter, "a device that clouds our minds and makes us accept what we would normally reject." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Emperor's guards moved closer, hands on their weapons. "Lies," Emperor Zorax shouted. "This human speaks treason." Frank continued, speaking quickly. "Look around you. How do you feel right now?" "Different, yes. Clearer. The scepter's influence has been blocked. For the first time in this chamber, you are hearing with unclouded minds." The Emperor raised his hand, signaling the guards. "Seize him." Before they could reach Frank, representatives from a dozen worlds stood up. "Let him speak," called the Proximan leader. "We want the truth," shouted another. In Frank's ear, Admiral Rodriguez's voice came through. "Our ships have disabled the Imperial communications array. They can't call for reinforcements. Keep going." The Emperor's face contorted with rage. He raised the scepter high and slammed it against the floor repeatedly. "Obey. You will obey your Emperor." But without the scepter's mind-altering effects, his commands had no power. More representatives stood, their voices rising in anger and confusion. How long have they controlled us this way? What else have they lied about? Frank watched as centuries of carefully maintained control unraveled in minutes. The Zephyrian guards looked uncertain, outnumbered by the growing crowd of angry representatives. Emperor Zorax backed away, his eyes darting around for an escape route. "Guards, clear the chamber." But the guards hesitated. Without the scepter's influence, even they seemed unsure of their loyalty. Seeing his power slipping away, the Emperor turned and tried to flee through a side door. Frank moved quickly, grabbing the Emperor's ornate robe. "You cannot escape accountability," Frank said, his voice steady. The Emperor spun around, swinging the scepter at Frank's head. Frank ducked and tackled the Zephyrian to the ground. They struggled briefly before Frank wrenched the scepter from the Emperor's grasp. "Help me," Frank called to the nearby representatives. The Proximan leader was the first to respond, rushing forward to help restrain the Emperor. Others followed, beings from a dozen different worlds, all moving to hold the struggling Zephyrian. "Let go of me," Emperor Zorex screamed. "I am your ruler, your god." But his words had no effect without the scepter. Together, Frank and the others lifted the Emperor to his feet. His ornate robes were torn, his composure shattered. "The Senate will decide your fate," Frank announced, "just as you have decided ours for too long." With representatives from multiple worlds holding him, they began to move the Emperor across the Senate floor toward the center of the chamber where all could see him. The once mighty ruler struggled and shouted threats, but each step diminished him further in the eyes of the gathered beings. His royal garments dragged on the floor, his crown fell and rolled away. In Frank's ear, Admiral Rodriguez reported, "Zephyrian ships are standing down. Our allies have control of the orbital platforms." Karen's data about their technology was right. Without leadership, they don't know what to do. As they dragged the Emperor to the central platform, Frank realized they were making history. The day humanity helped drag an Emperor across the Senate floor would be remembered for generations to come. Throughout the chamber, representatives were embracing, sharing information, discovering the truth for the first time. The veil had been lifted, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months after the fall of Emperor Zorax Voi, representatives from over 200 formerly subjugated worlds gathered again in the Senate chamber. The room looked different now. The imperial symbols had been removed. The raised platform where the Emperor once stood had been lowered to the same level as everyone else. Captain John Mitchell, now in his 70s, sat in a place of honor. As the first human to meet the Zephyrians 30 years ago, he had been asked to witness this historic day. "It still doesn't seem real," he said to Admiral Rodriguez, who sat beside him. "None of us expected change to come so quickly," she agreed. Once the scepter's influence was gone, centuries of resentment surfaced. The Empire collapsed in weeks. Across the chamber, Frank Winters was deep in conversation with delegates from a dozen worlds. After leading the Emperor's capture, he had become a key figure in the transition talks. Dr. Karen Smith entered the chamber, drawing attention from many representatives. Her work exposing Zephyrian technology had made her famous throughout the galaxy. Species that had been kept separate by imperial decree were now sharing knowledge freely, and Karen was helping coordinate this exchange. The last Zephyrian holdout surrendered this morning, she told John and Lisa as she joined them. Their fleet commander realized they couldn't win without the fear the Empire had built. "And what about the Zephyrians themselves?" John asked. "They'll send representatives next month," Lisa explained. "Not as rulers, but as equals." Many ordinary Zephyrians knew nothing about the scepter or the deception. They were controlled too, just with different lies. The chamber quieted as Scott Harper approached the central speaking area. In the months since the uprising, he had worked tirelessly to build bridges between formerly hostile species. "Representatives of the free worlds," Scott began, his voice carrying throughout the chamber. "Today we signed the Confederation Charter. Not an empire, not a kingdom, but a true alliance of equals." He gestured to a simple document displayed on screens around the room. "This charter guarantees the independence of all member worlds. It establishes shared defense, free trade, and the exchange of knowledge. No world may dominate another. No technology may be hoarded for power. No beings may be seen as lesser than others." Frank joined Scott at the center, adding, "The human concept of checks and balances forms the foundation of our new government. Power is distributed, never concentrated. Transparency is required, never optional. One by one, representatives came forward to sign the charter. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some floated, others slithered. Beings that would never have spoken to each other under the Empire now worked side by side. John Mitchell was asked to sign for Earth. With a steady hand, he wrote his name on the document that would shape the galaxy's future. "Did you ever imagine this when you first met the Zephyrians?" Karen asked him afterward. John shook his head. "Never. I was just trying to protect Earth from what seemed like an overwhelming power." He looked around at the diverse beings filling the chamber. "I never dreamed we would help free the galaxy." Later, on the observation deck of Earth's new flagship, Admiral Rodriguez and Senator Winters stood looking out at the stars. What made humans different? Lisa wondered aloud. Why were we the ones to finally break the Empire's hold? Frank considered the question. Maybe because we were the newest edition. We hadn't been under their influence long enough to lose hope. Or maybe, Lisa suggested, it's because of our history. Humans spent centuries fighting against our own tyrants. We recognize control when we see it, even disguised as protection. Either way, Frank said, we've changed the course of galactic history. Below them, the ship passed over the Zephyrian capital world. The Imperial Palace was now a museum, open to all species. The scepter itself was displayed behind protective glass, its power neutralized permanently. What happens now? Lisa asked. Frank smiled. Now the real work begins. Building something better is always harder than tearing something down. But worth it, Lisa added. Yes, Frank agreed, watching as ships from a dozen worlds flew in peaceful formation around them. Definitely worth it. On Earth, children were already learning about the day humanity helped drag an emperor across the Senate floor. It would be remembered not as the end of one empire, but as the beginning of a new age of freedom for countless worlds among the stars.